Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by MACF and Florida Makes. I am your host, Christian Davidson. Today is January 14th, 2021, and we are starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Today's topic, make your website work for you. I would like to introduce today's speaker, Matt Weber, National Google Supported Trainer.
Good morning,
A few
everyone.
housekeeping notes. As a participant, your audio will be in listen-only mode using your computer or your phone or computer audio, whichever is more convenient. Additionally, you will have the opportunity to ask your questions using the question window. This is a live webinar event which is being recorded. A link to the recording will be provided to you within a few days. Now, I would like to turn the presentation over to Matt Weber. Matt, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's program. We're going to share my screen here so that you can see what I'm seeing. And we'll just pop up the right screen. I think you're seeing what you should be seeing. You are, fantastic. Well, welcome. Welcome to this Grow with Google program. Grow with Google is an enormous program that has a tremendous amount of resources to help small and medium-sized businesses improve their digital presence. Now, pre-COVID, all of this material was being presented by instructor-led sessions where I would travel the country to teach these classes. But all the content has been adapted so that we can share it via webinars. Now, the advantage for you is that you don't miss out on any of this great content. The advantage for me is I get to sleep in my own bed before doing a presentation like this. When I'm not teaching for Google, I run a digital agency in Altamont Springs called Roar Internet Marketing. And I've been in the digital marketing space for 15 years. Today's program is called Make Your Website Work for You. And that one word, work, is going to be the theme of today's program. How does your website materially contribute to your organization's success? Now, I would think that if you had even a shred of doubt as to the importance of the website in your company's success, that COVID has eliminated that, because more than ever, your digital assets, your website, are the core of the connection between you and your prospects and your consumers. So today we're going to talk about web design, but a lot of times when people use the word web design, they talk about only the visual or aesthetic part of a website. But we're going to expand that a little bit in today's program and talk about kind of the entire gestalt, if you will, of websites. And we're going to use the word web design to refer to not just the graphics and the colors and the fonts, but we're going to go a little bit deeper today, and we're going to talk about functionality, content, and layout. So we're going to kind of go through the 6 key aspects of making sure that your website has great web design. And we're going to talk about making sure that it's goal-oriented. And if you're taking notes today, and I hope that you are, this is going to be the one where you're probably going to fill up a couple pages for. And then we're going to talk about how the content should be organized. We're going to talk about how to have useful content. And by the way, if you haven't attended a session like this before, this section about having useful content is going to feel a little contrary to what you may have been taught before and to maybe what your instincts are. Then we're going to talk about how important it is for your website to be functional, how important it is for your website to be intuitive, and then we're going to wrap up today's program with talking about how to make it search friendly, how to make it easier for search engines, including Google's, to find your website and to return it to people that are looking for what you do. So let's get started at the top, and let's begin by perhaps the most important of all of these sections about making your website goal-oriented. You know, when you design a website, I always tell people, you always start from the end. You start from the end of the customer journey and you think about what is it that you want the visitor to do on your website. And once you have clarity on that, then you can actually build the website. And what you may want people to do on your website may be different than, of course, other companies. So today's session is about asking you to take a few minutes and really put into writing, what is the end objective for your website? And some examples might be that you want to build a brand. So for example, maybe you have a very successful outbound sales team And at the end of that call with the prospect, of course, is going to instinctively go to the internet to check your company out. So not only does your website need to build a brand, but it maybe has to affirm the brand at that point. That's an important goal for a lot of people, particularly in B2B sales. Secondly, though, I work with a tremendous amount of companies whose sole purpose of their website is to generate leads. And in this scenario, the website really becomes like a salesperson. You're going to send interested people to the website, and you're going to hope that the website makes a compelling case to be able to convert that interested prospect into somebody who reveals themselves to you that you can potentially sell. Same role as a salesperson. So generating leads is just like having a digital salesperson. Now, there might not be too many people on today's program that use their website to make sales, but of course that's a big part of what we do as consumers. We buy a lot of things online. So maybe the part of your website that you have expressed as a goal is to make sales, and maybe it's not the total objective, but maybe it's a part of the objective. A fourth possible goal is to re-engage customers. Certain websites count on the fact that people will use them over and over again as a resource. Take the MACF website, for example. It's designed and built and successful, by the way, at getting people to come back for new and deeper content that can help their business. Now, pre-COVID, I worked with a lot of companies that were building microsites or website expressly for the purpose of attracting employees. Pre-COVID, the cost of recruitment had skyrocketed. And so the way to get around some of the larger directories that kind of have their handcuffs on employee recruitment was to build a microsite or a website explicitly devoted to recruitment. And we've done that. And then there are some websites that you probably have engaged with as a consumer whose sole goal is to simply provide support and sustain the relationship after the product is purchased. So there's no one single answer for this, but what's really important is that you do have an answer. So if someone were to say to you, what's the absolute end purpose of your website? You should absolutely know what that is. So in order to go forward, we need to know the goal of the website, and then we need to know something else. We need to know who is it that we're trying to reach, right? Because the personalization that's available now on the web is incredible. We no longer market with buckshot, we market with lasers on the web now. So the more we can articulate who it is that this asset is trying to convince, that's going to make a tremendous difference in how we design this website. So think about your customers, not necessarily from an old school demographic approach, male, female, age, and that is important, by the way, but go a little further and kind of think through, what is the problem that they are trying to solve? What is the stimulus that would put them in front of your website? Because if we understand what they're trying to solve, then we can start creating an asset that helps them on that journey, and helping them on that journey brings them closer to us. So we want to give some thought to what is the problem they're trying to solve, where do they live, where do they come from, how do they think, and what is surrounding them at the time that they are trying to solve this problem. Are they more likely to be in front of a desk? Are they more likely to be walking or mobile? And all those are going to be key drivers into the asset that we're going to make. And of course, really important and really beneficial in today's digital world is to think through, how are we going to measure success? So think about your website for just a minute. How do you know it's successful? I've often get people come to me and they say, hey, could you take a look at my website and could you tell me if it's a good website? Yeah, well, truthfully, I can't, because I don't know how they measure success. What is the goal that they have? So if the goal is online sales, right, that's incredibly trackable with an extraordinary level of precision. If their goal is leads, then we can track form submissions and we can track where they came from, and we can find out why people didn't fill out a particular form. And if their goal is still leads, phone call monitoring and phone call measurement has just grown by leaps and bounds in the past 18 to 24 months. So we can track that as well. And maybe we just want to measure engagement, because let's say you have a page on your website that is the single most important page that explains what you do and why should someone do business with you. We can measure whether or not someone's reading that page. We can measure how long they spend with it, Maybe there's a video on that page that gives a look at a certain piece of equipment that you have or that you can make. If no one's watching that video, if no one's engaging with that video, we can measure that. And we can then make changes to improve the website based on that data. And a lot of that data is going to come from a program, no doubt you've heard of. It's called Google Analytics. And I hope by this point in your digital strategy, you've installed Google Analytics on your website. It's absolutely free. I'll tell you how to install it in just a second. But some of the key things that we can get out of Google Analytics is we can learn which search terms drive traffic. Now let's stop here for a minute. Let's think about how different this is from perhaps traditional marketing, right? Because we were all taught about demographics, but really what's key is how do people express what you do. I work with a lot of small and medium-sized business owners, and I see a tremendous disconnect between the words they use to describe what they do and the words that prospecting consumers and searchers use to describe what that company does. Well, in today's world, as hard as this may be to swallow, if I had to ask you what's more important, the words that you want to use to sell your product or service, or the words that prospects use to find your service, which is more important? And it's the latter, right? I mean, understanding the language of our prospects and consumers is key to succeeding in this demographic world. And the key to understanding the demographic information that Google Analytics gives you is simply because it allows us to be more cost efficient. Remember, we're not gonna market with a shotgun anymore, and it doesn't mean that everybody listening to the program at one time or another will sell their product or service to the full edge of the age spectrum. That doesn't mean that that's not the case, but usually a pattern comes about, right? We're going to look for the top of that bell-shaped curve, and we can spend less money and be more effective if we focus on the characteristics of the people who are, in general, statistically, more likely to be receptive to our message than those who aren't. It just allows our money to go further. And then Google Analytics will also tell us what content on your website people are interested in. I'm going to ask a question here, and you don't have to say the answer out loud. I won't hear you, and nor do you have to raise your hand, but it is an important question for you to ask yourself. When is the last time the content on your website was changed in a significant way? Now, if quietly you said to yourself, I don't know, or years or months, then you're not quite in rhythm with what a website can offer you, because a website is really like a garden, and you constantly have to be pulling out the things that aren't working and replanting things that are working. A website simply is not a set it and forget it medium. And if you've taken that approach, that's maybe one of the reasons why you're not getting as much out of it as potentially you thought you would. Because Google Analytics will tell you, hey, you've got a piece of content on there and it's simply not effective. Maybe it's the way it's written, maybe it's the way it's laid out, but whatever that is, it's not working, and we don't need to leave it in there. We can pull it out and we can replace it with something that's better. So a website is a constant process of rejuvenating and enriching the content to make sure that it's bringing benefit to the people who are coming to it. And one of the other key things that Google Analytics is going to share with you is which channels are most productive for you. And when I use the word channel, I mean search engine optimization, or Google Ads, or social media, or even referral links, like from a website like MACF's website. I work with a lot of small and medium-sized business owners, and one of the things I hear is that they're frustrated because they just don't have enough time to understand it all. Should they be doing Google Ads, and should they be doing paid social, and should they be doing Facebook posts? And the answer lies in Google Analytics. There's no need to be masters of them all. Just be a master of the one that works best for you. So sail with the wind instead of sailing against the wind, and Google Analytics will tell you where you should be spending your time and money and which channel works for you. Now, if you haven't set up Google Analytics, again, I want to remind you it's completely free. You can find it at g.co/analytics, and you'll begin by picking a property. Now, a Google Analytics account is subdivided. It's subdivided into something called a property, and then properties are subdivided into something called views. Your company should have a Google Analytics account. And if perchance your company has more than one web asset, each one of those gets its own property. So for example, at Roar Internet Marketing, we have 5 different websites that we use for our marketing for different purposes. Each one of them has a property inside the same Google Analytics account. Now, depending on your technical skills, it could take you anywhere from an hour to 3 hours to set up Google Analytics. But you know, I've worked with so many small and medium-sized businesses that my counsel is, if it costs you a couple hours to buy professional expertise to make sure that your Google Analytics is set up correctly and fully, because it's possible to set up Google Analytics incompletely, meaning it can be there, but not everything is turned on. If you have to pay for an expert for a couple hours to make sure that that's done, do it. You'll get that back 100-fold. Better data leads to better decisions. And I can tell you with complete confidence, I have met more than my share of businesses that were spending not only money, but perhaps more preciously, time inefficiently because they didn't have the data to make the right decisions. So save time, save money, and get Google Analytics set up as quickly as possible. Now here's a look at that, just one of the few reports inside Google Analytics, and this is that demographic report, and this is just key, right? I mean, I work with a lot of elective medical practices, and not surprisingly with elective medical, you know, there's always a pattern that comes out. And some of the simpler ones are gender. Why should we spend money advertising to men when we can prove that 80% of leads come from women? When we can prove that women spend nearly twice as much time on the article on the website about a particular procedure than a man does? Why should we continue to spend money on men? So when you think about the amount of money that can be spent in a year's time, if you make it singularly 20% more efficient and you accumulate that over a year, imagine the effect that has on a company's bottom line. Now, the other characteristic that we'll talk about, besides being goal-oriented, which is what we just completed, making sure you have a goal so that we can find out how successful you are in achieving that goal, is making sure that your website is organized. Now, that's an odd word to associate with a website, isn't it? Organization. Sounds like we're talking about your house or a closet. But in this case, organization is just as important. And here we're going to talk about a discipline known as information architecture. And by the way, in no way do you have to become an expert at information architecture. In fact, there's now college programs available on information architecture. And information architecture spans a lot of media beyond the web, of course, into printed media. You know, back when you first walked into a library, you experienced information architecture. It's both the art and the science of arranging information in a logical way that enables someone to find out about it. And websites need to be logically organized. So on the screen, you can see if there was a website for a jeweler, it might have a page about their products, and that, what we would call a parent page, would talk about things like their jewelry products in general are the best and that they use the best materials in their jewelry products, and maybe they make their jewelry products in-house and they have their own jewelry craftsmen. It gives context to the word jewelry products. And then you'll notice on the screen that underneath that, there are what we call children pages of products, rings, watches, necklaces, because they are semantically related to products. Now, what would happen if the same website that you see on the screen didn't have those detail pages of rings and watches, and we talked about rings, watches, and necklaces all on that single product page? What would happen? Well, the downside is when the Google bot comes to that page and it says, well, what's this page about? It can't figure it out because it's about rings, it's about watches, it's about necklaces. And so if someone is searching specifically for rings, it's likely not to return that page because probably somewhere else on the internet is a competing website with a page that's devoted to rings. So remember, we're kind of trying to match users' desires expressed via search with content on the web. And so if you have a page explicitly about service A and someone is searching for service A, the bot is more likely to return that. Now let's go just a little bit deeper. Let's just say, for example, that this jewelry store did repair. Would it make sense to put that content on the product page? No. It means that another page has to be created about repair. Now, what if they repaired rings, watches, and necklaces? Would it make sense to have children pages under that parent page of repair for watch repair, ring repair, and necklace repair? Yes, it would, because people search for ring repair, watch repair, and necklace repair. So the taxonomy, when I use the word taxonomy, think about your family tree for just a minute, right? If you visualize your family tree and you see your spot on that family tree, you can tell that you get some of your meaning from your parents above you, and you share or spread some of your meaning to the people below you on that family tree. And websites are organized in the same way, that a parent page is going to spread some context for the bot to the detail page that are children of that page. So it helps, a good information architecture helps search engine bots understand what a page is about, but it also provides a useful path for the user, right? Because if the user wants deeper, more specific information, you allow them to progress in an organized manner to get the information that they're seeking. So when you're designing this information architecture, and then it has to be represented visually on your website, a couple tips to keep up there are, of course, use short descriptive names and labels. And one of the things we'll talk about many times in today's programs is that it's really important that you remember that people don't read websites. And if you're not a note taker today and you just want to write down the absolute impactful things that we're going to talk about, then that's one of the things that you want to write down. People don't read websites. They skim websites. And so we're going to web design for skimmers. We're not going to web design for readers. So using short descriptive names and labels helps us talk to skimmers. Now, when I look at a lot of websites and I say, well, where did that navigation come from? I'll typically get an answer. Well, someone will say, well, the boss wanted to make sure that was featured, or the boss wanted to make sure that was prominent, or these are the things that we sell the most. And so this is where we have to do that pivot. Instead of looking at the way that we want to promulgate it out, we have to talk about how do people search and look inward rather than look outward. So the main navigational elements are the ones that people use most to find your content. And that may not be the information architecture that is instinctive to the way that you've traditionally organized your selling materials. And to wrap all of this up, it really kind of starts and ends with the phrase, keep the visitor in mind. How would they look for what they want? How are they going to search? And remember, the navigation isn't for you or your company. The navigation is for them. So how does it help them, not how does it help you? All right, we're going perhaps a little quickly, and I hope we're not going too fast, but let's talk about the third important element of good web design, and that is that a great website is useful. And you might say, boy, that sounds like a truism, right? Who needed to tell you that? But 46% of people say they will make a conscious decision not to buy again from brands that have an interruptive or not conducive mobile experience. Isn't that interesting? So think of this as just like your last restaurant experience. The food might have been great, but if it was hard to order and it took a long time to get to you, then you probably don't visit that restaurant again, even though the food was great. And that's the way that consumers tend to look at websites, is if it didn't offer the level of usefulness, it tends to supersede the quality of the product or service in many cases, right? So we can lose out on a good prospect simply because the doorway that we gave them didn't give them a good experience in their journey to get to us. So what is useful content? Now we're going to go back to this really key point that we're not going to design for readers. We're going to design for skimmers, which means we're going to use a lot of headlines, subheads, and bullet points. What's a great way to talk to skimmers? by the use of headlines and subheads. So if I go to your website and I look at the headlines and the subheads, I should quickly get a general idea of whether or not this website is going to be beneficial or useful to me just by reading the headlines and subheads. And we're going to use a lot of bullet points in there too. I would also ask you to consider what is becoming widely known as the three sentence rule. If you look at your website right now, and if you've got a lot of paragraphs that are longer than 3 sentences, it's probably a strong inhibiting factor to someone consuming that content. So again, think about these skimmers, think about these impatient people scrolling through your website, and how do we present the content in a more useful way to them as we make sure we use headlines, subheads, bullets, and adhere to the 3 sentence rule. Let's think about your experience with social media for just a minute and think about what has kind of happened to our society over the past couple years. I think you would agree with the statement that social media has had an enormous impact on our society in many, many ways. And one of those ways is that it's changed how we consume content. Now think about this for just a minute. Pause and think about the last time you were on social media. What percentage of the content was text and what percentage of the content was imagery in some way or the other? Graphic, a GIF, a meme. Yeah, so if you reflect on that, you go, oh boy, probably 60 to 70% of the things in your feed are a video, a graphic, a GIF, or a meme. So we're not, and I don't mean this is too much of an exaggeration, but we're not a whole lot removed from returning to the age of hieroglyphics, right? I mean, so to succeed in today's digital world, you have to be a competent visual storyteller. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have text. We've got to have a balance, but we have to think through how much today's consumers are visual consumers. Now, some of you are thinking right now and you're going, oh yeah, that's true for young people and not very true for older people. And that's not the case, right? I mean, we see this over and over again that really as a society, we are looking at people who want to consume media in a visual form rather than reading it in a text form. So images, photos, videos have got to be central to your messaging. And some of you are like, well, I don't really have a really visual business. I think you have to be creative. I remember that we worked with a business who had a wonderful, wonderful warranty. And that was part of their value proposition, is they just had a stronger warranty than anybody else. And they said, well, how do you present a strong warranty visually? And you know what we did? We created a certificate. We created a graphic certificate that kind of looked kind of diploma-esque on that. And we put that in there. So did it have all the terms and conditions of the warranty? No, but it visually represented that they have this warranty, and it led them to text that explained the warranty in more detail. And I don't know that I have to mention at all how key videos are. I mean, you can put the word how to in front of almost any phrase that you can think of and find a video for it on YouTube. And I'm sure most of you know that YouTube is the second most widely used search engine on the internet. So we know that people have an appetite for videos, and we know that people are using videos for far more things than just looking at cats playing at the piano. Video can be a useful, pragmatic, and valuable marketing tool and a key asset in your website. So much of what we've just talked about is kind of based on the principle of knowing what people look for. And I'll tell you one of my key fundamental philosophies. If you don't know the target, the weapon really doesn't matter. Would you agree with that? If you don't know the target, the weapon really doesn't matter. So if you're in today's program and you really don't have clarity on what words people use to go to Google to find what you do, then you've just learned what your absolute first step is from participating in today's program. Because it's almost impossible for your website to be effective if we don't have that starting point. So where can you find that? You can find that on our free Google tool called Google Trends, and you can find it at g.co/trends. And when you get to Google Trends, you'll be able to experiment. You'll be able to put in different phrases. Maybe you're going to meet with your team after this program and say, what words would we use to find what we do? And maybe you make a list of them. And then you start putting those phrases into Google Trends. You'll be able to type them in, and you can select a geography and you can select a period of time. And Google Trends will let you compare phrase A to phrase B and phrase C and phrase D. You know, my grandfather always said, fish where the fish are. So if your website is optimized right now around a phrase that nobody uses, there's really no productivity in for it. So look for the phrase that people use, and remember that these phrases change over time, but that's our starting point. Getting a key understanding to what words people use to find what you do. Now, regardless of what industry you're in participating in this program today, and I know some of you are thinking, wow, I'm in a really niche business and people don't use Google. Let me assure you with 100% confident, you're not correct. No matter what niche you're in, how specific it is that the product is you produce, there are people looking for it. I have worked with some of the most niche products imaginable, and there are people that go to Google to find out about it. So use this free tool, g.co/trends. It's called Google Trends. Now, next today, we want to explore how and why your website should be functional. And by functional, I don't mean that when someone clicks on a button, it should appear. We're going to talk about it in a little bit more depth. And so specifically, what functions do great websites have? And certainly foremost on this list is a site search. So yes, they went to Google, they typed in words, and Google returned to your website, but now you have just a couple seconds to connect them to what they're looking for. If the navigation of your website is built on these phrases that people use and it's built around what they look for, then it's going to be easier for them. But what if it's not? And how do we get people to the content they're looking for the fastest? Almost every website today should have an inherent site search. So if they don't see what they're looking for in the main navigation, they can type in a box and it can get closer to what they're looking for. And here's how impactful this is. Now, we can talk about all the bells and whistles of marketing that we want, slogans and great logos and all kinds of jargons and cool design. But what the data tends to show is that it's much simpler than that. The data tends to show that he who gets the searcher what they want the fastest typically wins. And I think you can identify with that because I think we're all kind of impatient when we get to the web, right? So listen to that one more time. He who gets the searcher what they want the fastest typically wins. Now, remember, this is not the old days where we would, drive from store to store to find what we're looking for. The next option is just a single click away. So if you've done a lot of things right and you get a good prospect to your website, but they can't find exactly what it is that they're looking for or a solution to the problem they're trying to solve, what do? Did they devote their entire life to picking through every element of your website to try to find it? No. In fact, after mere seconds, they just conclude and try to find another option, right? In this world, the good news is it's easier to get prospects to fall in our lap. The bad news is competitors have never been closer. Your competing product or service is just a click away, another Google search away. So we have to take advantage of that opportunity when we get a great prospect on our website and get them directly to the thing that they're looking for. Hey, and by the way, here's a bonus. When we put that site search on our website, we can trap all of that data. We can trap the words that they use. So not only can we see the words that they use when they go to Google, we get to this other phenomenal market research that we get to see the words they use when they use a site search on your website. Absolutely phenomenal market research. Why would we not want to capture that? So the second way that a website can be really, really functional is through an online form. And this issue is about control. Consumers today want control. Why do they want control? Because they can have it. Think about the consumer's world. The internet is everywhere. It's on their watch, it's on their phone, it's at their desktop. Consumers are convinced that they can find what they want when they want it. So in many, many studies, consumers have shown over and over again that they'll prefer to fill out a form. Why? Because they're in control of the timing of the relationship. If they pick up the phone and call, then they have to abdicate some of that control, and now that control goes to you. So if they can fill out a form and ask explicitly what they are looking for and get that return back quickly, then that allows them to control the pace of the journey. A lot of people ask me to look at websites to see if they're good, and they always show me the homepage. Truth is, homepages sometimes, most of the time, really don't factor into a website success. The design of forms really influences success, because we're 100% sure, without any ambiguity, that the more pieces of information you ask someone for in an online form, the less likely they are to fill out that form. It's a distinct linear relationship. Remember, people are lazy on the internet. So if you've got a form on your website that's asking for a bunch of information that's really incidental to what the next step of the sales process is, you're simply costing yourself. True story. I was meeting with a company just a couple weeks ago, and they still had fax number on their online form, right? It asked for fax number. And I said, when's the last time you faxed somebody? And of course, they kind of scratched their head and scratched their chin and said, oh, we don't fax people anymore. So why is it on the form? And then one of the managers of the company was very bold and strongly said, well, you can see it's not required. You're right, it wasn't required. But does it contribute to the perception that the form is harder to fill out than it should be, right? So it's how hard does the form look like it is to fill out, not how hard is it actually to fill out. So the form on your website is the intersection between how hard someone's going to work and the value they perceive in what you're offering. So listen, if you're on the program today and you're selling a life-saving device that someone's going to get, listen, ask 30 questions and they'll answer every one of them. But if what you're selling isn't essentially life-saving, then you should look at every piece of information you're asking for in a form and ask yourself, is it absolutely necessary for the next part of the sales stage? So if you don't need my name as 2 fields, Matt Weber, and you only need it as 1 field, Matt Weber, then only ask for it in 1 field. Because something as simple as making me type into 2 fields will have a negative effect on what we call the conversion rate of that form. So think through the form design of your website. It has to be functional in this case. And of course, if you have an online store, we all know about abandonment rate and how many times people put something into the cart and then don't purchase it. It's the bane of everybody who sells things on the internet. Why does someone put something into a cart and ultimately not buy it? What are those factors that contribute to that? And we could do a whole 2-day program on that. But let's talk about ourselves as consumers for just a second. Let's go back to the holiday season and let's go back to some of the things that you bought online. Did you notice how much time is spent on making that checkout process easier? Have you noticed the design standards and design best practices that are now spreading to make that a simple process? That's all thought out, and that's all the product of a lot of testing on that. You know, a couple of companies have mastered the one-click sale, and a company or two has mastered the no-click sale, right? That I can go to my device and just say, buy product X, and it gets purchased without me even clicking it. So if consumers have been exposed to one-click sales, and in cases no-click sales, think about how they might look at what your online sale process is if you haven't taken that same kind of thought process to eliminating all of the unnecessary steps and making that transition as easy as possible. Remember, we want to eliminate as much friction out of the process as we can. And when I use the word friction, some of that friction is mental, meaning if the consumer gets exasperated even for the smallest point, then they bail, because remember, the alternative is just one click away. And then functionality for a lot of folks needs to evolve into talking more about online tools. So how can you produce something that gives a consumer an easier way or a better path to buy what it is that you offer? So for example, if you ran a shoe repair business and people are always stopping you with what you do because they're calling you quotes, how much does it cost to replace a heel, and how much does it cost to replace the entire sole? Well, why not put that on your website and just give them the opportunity and say, well, what kind of shoe is it? Is it male or female? Does it have laces? Does it not have laces? What is it material made out of on that? Are you seeking a sole replacement or a heel replacement? And they just click buttons, super simple. They send it in and you return a quote from that. Saves you time, saves them time, and it connects them to you. So if they got a really friendly, helpful answer back, are they going to look for the other option? No, not at all. And of course, if you're a small cafe and people are constantly calling, do you deliver? Do you have vegetarian this? Is this made in a vegan portion of that? If you're getting the same questions all the time, then there's a really strong clue that your website is missing an important piece of functionality, a very simple and well done FAQ page. And sometimes we call FAQ pages SAQ pages, not frequently asked questions, but should ask questions. What should consumers ask to be able to understand how to purchase what it is that you offer? And maybe sometimes they don't know the questions. So your FAQs, or behind the scenes called SAQs, can help them get deeper into that. And people love FAQ sections, by the way. And certainly if you've done any online shopping over the holidays, you have seen how people just adore the ability to ask questions about a particular product, no matter how obvious the answer may be. So the do's and don'ts of functionality here, make sure it's useful, make sure it's bringing some value to them. We work with a landscape company and we added a calculator that allows people to figure out how much rock and how much mulch that they should buy. I used to measure mulch that I bought by how much fit in my Honda Pilot. That was my standard, but now I can go to their website and put in the measurements of the area that I'm trying to cover, and it will tell me exactly how many bags, because I have bought more bags than I needed, more times than I can hesitate to want to remember. And keep your forms short. Remember, we talked about only ask for the information that's absolutely necessary for you to process the lead and make any checkout process easier. What not to do? I got to tell you, people hate pop-ups. And pop-ups come in all forms, and they come in different names when you talk about them with technology people, that they're technically not pop-ups. They're called interstitials, is a really cool, sexy name for them right now, but consumers still hate them. Consumers don't like disruptive experience. Consumers don't like it when videos autoplay, and they absolutely hate it when videos autoplay with sound. Again, they want to be in control. They want to choose, and never sacrifice user experience for design. So what that sentence means, and you've been to a website that looks like this, where it looks great, and at one time the designer looked at it and said, man, that is visually awesome. But people can't use it, right? They can't find what they're looking for. And I'm gonna tell you something here that you may disagree with, but I've proven it over and over again. And that is that clarity will beat cleverness 80% of the time. Cleverness gets the headlines, cleverness gets the viral activity on social media. Clarity sometimes doesn't get the PR. But if you had to choose between something that's pure and direct and useful for visitors, and something that maybe wins a design award but isn't as useful for visitors, choose the former, choose what's useful for visitors. And finally, we're going to talk about that a great website is intuitive. And when I think about this, I often think of online games. So if you're a gamer yourself on the program today, or if you have people in your family that are gamers, you've noticed this ability that great games don't need explanation. You've noticed this ability that when someone sits down to a great game, no one has to say, you use this button to do that, and you use this button to do that. It's intuitive. And great websites really kind of need to have the same thing, because something very interesting is happening with consumers, and that is that the line is blurring between the apps that they use on their phone and websites. It wasn't that long ago when consumers could distinguish, oh yeah, I got that app and I downloaded it, and oh, this is a website from a company. They don't make that distinction as much anymore. So the expectations they have of your mobile website are now born from the experiences they have with their favorite apps, which means you have to stop for a second and you have to kind of look around you, take stock at, what apps do consumers use, and look at them and see how fluid they are. And if your website isn't designed with that same type of fluidity and designed explicitly for use on a mobile device, it's going to have difficulty being effective in this digital era. So what specifically do I mean by this? Meaning that, again, don't make people work. The minute you make people work, you lose them. So you're going to highlight selected elements on that page, which is designed explicitly for mobile, and you want to allow plenty of space for users to tap. So where does this go awry for 50% of business websites right now? And if we looked at every website from every attending the program, I guarantee you we'll find this on at least 50%, that somebody designed a desktop website, typically on WordPress, and the theme, the underlying WordPress theme says, oh, we've got a mobile version, and the theme made the mobile version ostensibly from making the big thing small. That's all it did, is it make the big thing small. So the space relationship between the navigational items didn't change. The relationship between all the items, space-wise, design-wise, on the desktop is the same as the mobile. They just made it smaller. Now we took something that was designed to be navigated from a cursor and a mouse with a tremendous amount of dexterity. We made it smaller when people are going to be navigating with their thumbs. Is that going to work? Not going to work. So we have to have that same level of app design where someone went into it saying, hey, this is going to be used by somebody with thumbs. Let's design it to be used with somebody by thumbs. In fact, when we do websites today, we reverse the process from not that long ago. We design the mobile version first, and then we build the desktop from what we've learned from the mobile version. Still, a lot of people out there are designing a desktop version of a website and then creating a mobile version from it, which is just not going to be as effective in that. So if someone is giving you a website design to review, or even an email to review, and they say, yeah, here's what it's going to look like, and they show you what it's going to look like on a desktop, you could just politely say, hey, thanks, but it's 2021. Let's look at it with what's going to look like on a mobile device, and then we'll make our decision about that. Now, remember we talked about taking away friction, and that's that what is called a CTA, a call to action, has to be very prominent on that design. So people are very comfortable with scrolling on a mobile phone, not as comfortable with scrolling on a desktop, but they're used to digesting information on a phone through scrolling. Why? Because that's how the popular apps that they use have trained them to digest information. So if we're scrolling, and we're doing a lot of scrolling, and the thing that we want them to do is at the top of the page, and then they scroll and then they no longer see the thing that we want them to do, you know, whether that's the contact button or they get a quote button, they're scrolling, and now the thing that we want them to do is out of their field of vision for the majority of their experience on that page. And that's going to be a design that's typically going to fail in achieving those objectives. So that call to action needs to be visible throughout their journey on the mobile device, and it has to be easy to be tapped, right? Because remember, we're going to start at the end. What is it that we want people to do? And that's the fulcrum of every web design decision that we make. Now, for the small number of people that are on the program today that do have an e-commerce application, you know, one of the things we notice about watching consumer behavior on e-commerce websites, let me make sure I stress that, e-commerce websites, is that people travel forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward. That's different than most business websites. Most business websites, people generally progress forward and only in some unusual situations ever go backward. In e-commerce, we actually want to make it conducive for them to go backward. Right, so it's like being in the grocery store and going from aisle 10 back to aisle 4. You don't want to force people to only travel in the direction of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. On e-commerce, they have to be able to go from aisle 10 to aisle 4, aisle 8, back, etc. It's a very hectic and oftentimes illogical path that people take on e-commerce websites. You know that going into it, so you've got to be able to design it in order for it to be conducive. So you've got to do things that help people go backwards, like cookie crumbs, telling them where they just came from, and making sure that you give them related products to be able to make sure that they go the other direction. So if you're on the program today and you have an e-commerce website, remember that people are much more frenetic in their consumer journey on e-commerce websites than they are. And of course, that checkout process, I asked you this time as marketers and business owners, the next time you buy something online, to really carefully look at the checkout process of some of the larger brand retailers. because they have the benefit of tremendous amounts of not only internal research teams, but research budgets. And when you go through that, carefully study. You know, I'm a big believer in one of the great things about advertising is that the best examples, the best practices are all around us. You know, it's not like some other disciplines where the best work is hard to get. The best work is pretty easy to see sometimes. So study the checkout design of some of the bigger brands and look how they've reduced checkout steps. And man, that is key. And remember, a lot of us have experienced one button checkout. And when does one button checkout become the rule rather than the exception? Right now it's the exception, but we're not too far from that being the expectation. You know, people always want to know where they are. So progress bars, you've seen them in different shapes and different forms, whether that's them telling you from a text standpoint, you're in step 1 of 3, or a visual representation of a bar going across. People have to know what's coming. And if they don't know what's coming, then they're more likely to leave. So you always have to give people a look at what the future is going to be. Offer guest checkout. You know, it's very presumptuous to think that everybody wants to give you their email address and all of their full details. That's very presumptuous. You've got to be able to offer a smooth guest checkout experience. And today, I think what's becoming really commonplace is the digital wallet. So whether you offer someone the ability to pay by some mechanism that's already embedded in their device, I would say within the next 6 to 9 months, if you're not offering that, that's going to have to be one of the top priorities on your list, because you're going to stand out 6 to 9 months ago. If you're still one of the websites that says input your credit card number, you're going to stand out as looking like a little bit of an antique very quickly. So enable some form of digital wallet, whichever one's conducive for you. So hopefully we've evolved. I can remember, you know, 4 or 5 years ago that we were telling people the mobile divide is coming. We were telling businesses, get ready, that consumers are going to become mobile-oriented consumers, that you're going to have to adopt a mobile-first strategy. And I would say, for the most part, many businesses have had that epiphany, maybe later than perhaps that they should. But if you're on the program today, and if you're not thinking mobile-first, designing mobile-first, strategizing mobile-first, maybe reevaluate that and make sure the data doesn't suggest that you should be doing that. And of course, the cornerstone of having a mobile-first strategy is this idea of responsive design, where the website morphs itself to cater to the device characteristics with it. And so unlike television, where if you and I have different brands of televisions and different sizes, in general, we're going to see the same thing when we tune in. Certainly the opposite of that is true in the digital world. The device that we have, the browser that we use, all dictate certain differences with what users see, and that can be more pronounced if the website isn't developed correctly. So a good way to test for that is to use a free tool called the Chrome Inspector. You find that on the Google Chrome browser. So just log in Google Chrome, call up your website, and then in the top right-hand side on the menu bar of Google, you'll see something that says an option is to click Inspect. And then when you click on Inspect, you'll see what appears to look like HTML code, most of it is. And then in the top left-hand corner, you'll see a little thing that looks like a mobile phone with a little graphic around it. And that is called the Toggle Device Toolbar. And so you can actually look at your website on a tremendous variety of different devices. And so what Chrome will do at that point is simulate that device on your website. And it may surprise you that not every device sees your website in the same way. And just look around you the next time you're out in public, if you do go out in public, and look at the different devices, of course, that are out there. I mean, just we live in a world with a tremendous amount of variety of technical options now. And it doesn't mean that everybody who has an iPhone is operating on the same operating system, and just everybody who has an iPhone isn't using the same model of an iPhone, and the same thing for Android phones. So somebody does have to pick through and look at that. Now we can reverse this a little bit and save some time, because in Google Analytics, we can actually look at the visitor behavior by device. And so maybe we flip this and look at that data first, and then if we see there's an anomaly somewhere where people aren't doing the things that we want them to do on a particular device, then we can use the inspector tool to figure out why that is, and likely we'll figure out that there's some part of it that's not rendering correctly. All right, we're in the home stretch. We're running just a little bit over time, but the last thing we're going to talk about is a great website being search friendly. I think this is a key point, and I want to drive this home just a little bit because the data proves this over and over again, and this is not just Google data. You can find this. A number of people have substantiated this point that 75% of smartphone owners turn to search to address their immediate needs. And this is very vivid to me because just a couple weeks ago, I was working with a company up north who installs standby home generators, you know, the really large generators that are permanently hardwired into the house. They're really popular up north where the electrical infrastructure is older and homes are more prone to losing electricity, particularly during the winter. And so that's all they do is they sell and they service those. And they said, you know, 5 years ago, our bread and butter was advertising on radio and we did really well. And for 5 years, we've continued to buy the same radio station, the same radio ad, the same script, even bought it from the same radio salesperson, you know, and they chart a very significant deterioration in results all the way through that. And, you know, they were puzzled as to why, but, you know, if you think about it, and I asked them to think about it, if you go out to test start your generator some cold morning and it doesn't work, what are you going to do? Turn on the radio? No. You're going to go to search. And you're going to put generator repair near me, right? I mean, that is the absolute path for 85% of the people who find themselves with a problem on that. So 75% of smartphone owners turn to search for their immediate needs. And that's just an incredible statistic to remember. So if people are going to search for solution, that means that you have to present that possible solution to them to bridge the connection between them and your business. So just for context a little bit, we're going to get mildly deep into SEO in just a few minutes. So just for context, just to make sure that everybody knows what we're talking about, on the screen right now is what's called a Google search engine results page. You're going to hear people abbreviate this as SERP, S-E-R-P. They'll use that as a word. That's a SERP in front of you on the screen right now. And just quickly, the components, right? You can see a text ad on there. You can see a shopping ad. Shopping ads are available to people who have an e-commerce website. And the whole process starts with a search query that somebody types into Google, and then depending on the search, if someone did a branded search, a business profile on Google My Business may show up on the right-hand side. So those are the basic components when we talk about a SERP, and what we're going to talk about in the next few seconds is appearing in those organic results, or some people call them natural results. Some people call them natural or called organic because in general, and please underline those two words, in general, we don't manipulate or control the placement of those results. They happen organically through the factors that we're going to talk about. So again, just to give you a quick overview of the process, you know, Google has a web crawler, lots of companies have a web crawler. Google pioneered the idea of crawling the web. And they find different web assets like your website, and when they find it, they send back information about that web asset to their library or their index or the Google servers. So then Google compiles this index of information about your website. Think of it as a deck of cards that is constantly being rearranged in different ways. And then Google will use 200 plus signals to find the most relevant content for a searcher. So it's kind of like a dating service, right? Google, somebody goes to Google, types in a phrase, and then Google's obligation is to find what is the content that matches the intent of the searcher. And then Google's going to return the results ranked in the order that it thinks is relevant for that. And we also often talk oversimplistically about the Google algorithm, when in truth there are multiple algorithms that contribute to this output. And it's been said that if you took all of the computer code that goes into the Google algorithms for this process and printed it out in 8.5 by 11 paper, it might come up to your waist, right? So it's a very deep process. So if you ever hear anybody say, oh, we know the Google algorithm, no one knows the Google algorithm. It's extraordinarily complex. But what are some things that are help without really getting into the nitty gritty? What are some things that you could do at the end of this program, at the end of this, to improve your chances to appear on a Google search engine results page? And the number one thing that I would suggest to you is check out your load time. Remember, we're all very impatient. People don't wait for websites to load. And so Google, therefore, does not want to return a website to a searcher looking for a solution that's going to make them wait. So you've got a great tool here. It's called the Google Speed Test. You can find it at g.co/testmysite, and I'll give you some benchmarks. Ideally, your website should load in 2 seconds or less. In an ideal world, a second. Now that may sound like a hard to obtain number, but it's really not. And I would be willing to bet that you, at some point, abandoned a website because it didn't load quickly. Lots of people have done some different studies, and it varies by segment, but there's a couple pieces of popular research that say that the average business website in the United States loads in between 6 and 8 seconds. Well, if best practice is to load in 2, and we know that we're dealing with increasingly impatient consumers, if you're loading in 6 to 8 seconds or longer, it's just immediately putting your company at a disadvantage, right? So you're just starting with an anchor tied to your digital strategy. So check that out. And then we've talked quite a bit about useful content. And remember, the very beginning of the program, I said, you know, this may be the hardest part for you to swallow, because I want you to look at your website right now and how much of that content is what we would call chest thumping content, right? It's things that you want to say, you know, and how long you've been in business and how experienced your leadership team is, and maybe what your mission statement is. But let me ask you, when's the last time you have done business with a business solely because they had a great mission statement, or because their leadership had a fixed number of years of experience? At the end of the day, consumers are looking for the solution, and that's key to remember as hopefully participating in this program. People go to the web to solve a problem. So now you've got to position your content, rethink about it, and it's less about what you want to say and more about what people want to hear, what's going to help them solve the particular problem they have. And that's a paradigm shift for a lot of people, and I totally get it. Now, the third thing that you can do quickly to improve your search engine optimization is making sure that you've got good, what are called internal links within the website, because what defines the content of a page? Well, if I link from another page to it, the words that are used in that link help the bot understand what the ensuing page is about. So if you've got some pages on your website and there's another page that links to it by saying, hey, if you want more information on our blank service, click here, and the link words are click here, then in some ways you're kind of telling the bot that the next page behind that link is about the words click here. And I don't think too many of you are trying to rank for the phrase click here. So use those internal links as a way to give the bot a cue about what that page is about, and more importantly, give the user a way to travel along a path that is most helpful to them. And give the user a good idea of what the page is going to be about on that SERP by including relevant and helpful page titles and descriptions. Page titles and descriptions, the title appears in the tab in the browser when you roll over it, and the description may appear in your organic listing as what's called a snippet in your organic listing. What's their role? Their role is to help consumers decide if this page is going to bring value. So you could have one of a couple common mistakes on your website right now. You could have the same page titles and snippets on every page on your website, and that isn't helping users or search engines. Or maybe your page titles and descriptions simply aren't reflective of what the page is. Maybe you put your company name on every title and in every description, when the user really at this point isn't concerned about the brand name. The user is really concerned about how you're helping them solve their problem. And then the other thing that you can do is just make sure that the website not only works well on all browsers and devices, but also loads quickly on all browsers and devices. So we talked about that Chrome inspector, which is really great, but don't forget that we've talked about that really pure empirical data about how people use your website on every single browser and device is available to you in Google Analytics. So if you have a weakness somewhere, identify it very quickly. There's also a free tool that'll kind of give you an x-ray of your website. It's called Google Search Console. It's absolutely free. And think of Google Search Console as an x-ray machine for your website. You can see it exactly the way that Google does. So if it's got technical issues and there's a page that you think exists, but Google can't find it, that's where you'll figure it out. You can, if you change content, you can request that Google comes back to the website to check it out. Remember that Google doesn't visit your website every single day. You can look at details of your Google search traffic inside there, and often people use paid tools to find out where they rank. I say, get the information from the horse's mouth. Want to find out where you rank for a particular phrase? Go to Google Search Console. And you can also sign up for alerts. So if your site's been hacked with malware, for example. A lot of that is invisible. You'll never know it. You can sign up for a free alert from Google if they find any kind of technical issue that's inhibiting the proper display of your website. 100% completely free. It's absolutely the most underutilized digital asset that's available today, and it's called Google Search Console, and you can find it at g.co/search console. So what's in there? Lots of great data about your website's performance, whether or not Google can find out about particular pages. So there may be a particular page that you think is the crux of your sales argument, and Google can't see it for whatever variety of reasons on there. You'll find that in the URL inspector, and it will give you some indicators of which pages are less usable from a mobile standpoint. Google knows how important mobile is to users, so they're going to respond to that by making sure that you, as the website owner, have a lot of data about how your website functions in a mobile environment. And I think you get why this is so key, because the website influences almost any digital tactic that you want to take. The success of it's going to be influenced by your website. You want to do Google Ads? Its success is going to be influenced by your website. Want to do organic search? Going to be influenced by your website. Want to use paid YouTube media? Going to be influenced by your website. Everything kind of circles back to your website. Almost every online marketing technique that's available to your company right now is going to be influenced by your website. So your website's kind of the catcher. So if you've got a great pitcher, but that pitcher's throwing the ball to somebody who can't catch, makes the pitcher look bad. So you've got to get the catcher the ability to catch everything that's being thrown at it. Okay, we're kind of winding down to the end, and so we want to make sure that you kind of leave here with an action plan today, and we didn't just fill your notepad up with a lot of interesting statistics. So what's the action plan? The action plan is to make a list of goals and to know and be able to articulate explicitly what is the objective for your website. And then from that, now we can start evaluating an intuitive design, something that's easy for people to use, that speaks to how they're looking and for the goal that you're trying to accomplish. And then develop a very plain information architecture that isn't based on what you want to say, but is based on how people search and what they're looking for. And the fourth action plan is to kind of transition a little bit and think like the Red Cross, right? What's the Red Cross's mission in life? It's to help people. So now let's approach our website content not from the standpoint of selling, but think of our website content as an opportunity to help. What would we write? What would we offer if we were trying to help the people who are looking for our service? Completely different approach. And finally, then let's add useful functionality. What can we build that would help them buy our product or service? And then finally, to be search engine friendly through some of the techniques that we talked about today so people have an ability to find us. So I hope you got a lot out of today's program. And I mentioned in the very beginning that Grow with Google is an enormous program, and it goes far beyond these great webinars. And it includes one of my favorite apps called Primer. And if you've got a couple seconds to download this app, it's available in both the Apple Store and in Google Play. And it is called Primer. And it's got a bunch of bite-sized digital marketing lessons in it. So if you have any kind of idle time in your life, you're waiting for somebody, maybe you're on the treadmill, and you want to go through a couple slides about a great digital topic to advance yourself, you should download this app. And if that lesson isn't particularly relevant to you, skip it, go to the next one. But what I like about it is, remember I talked about that as a society, we're becoming visual learners. This is an app that takes all these digital lessons and has transformed them into short, bite-sized digital lessons. Now you can find some more extensive help by going to g.co/grow, and you can see some short videos there. We're all different learners. We all learn in different ways. And if you go to g.co/grow quick help, you'll find some great short videos. And you can also go to Google On Air, where there's free virtual workshops about all types of digital skills, not only for businesses, by the way, but for teachers and students as well. And you can go to g.co/grow on air. And a lot of these are repurposed live presentations that were done in instructor-led environments. And the entire library and the entire vault of resources that's available is at google.com/grow. You'll find learning assets there for teachers and students, local businesses, job seekers, and even if there's somebody listening today who wants to maybe see if they want to sharpen their developer abilities, maybe you're a DIY type person, you want to do some of the things we've talked about today yourself, some great assets to learn a little bit more about development there. So check out everything that's available to you with Grow with Google, an enormous plan that can help your business. Now, I know we ran just a little bit over time, but I'm going to hang around for just a few minutes to see if anybody has any questions, which you can put into the chat box. And Christian's able to take a look at those questions there. And we'll turn it back over to Christian to see if she has any questions or if the audience has provided any questions that I can help with.
Oh, Matt, thank you so much. This has been some fantastic information that we hope all of our attendees got a lot of things to bring back to their own companies and websites. If you do have questions, you can type them into the question or chat box, and we'll go ahead and get those questions over to Matt. Matt, while we're waiting for those questions to come in, we have an upcoming webinar with you in February about using data to drive your business growth. Do you want to give us a short commercial for what you'll go over in that webinar?
Yes, it's based on, again, research that's been repeated many times over the past decade by a lot of companies, and they all end up with the same conclusion, that companies that use a data-driven marketing strategy outperform their peers that do not use a data-driven marketing strategy. And there's so much great data available now. In fact, I think a lot of people feel like they're drowning in data. So what this program focuses on is what data is essential and how to cull through the data that is available to you to use it for actual actionable decisions that can improve your digital strategy and improve your company performance.
Questions in here. What is your advice on subscriptions for your product?
I think if you can pull it off, I think it's phenomenal, because it gets back to that, one button purchase. The less we make people think about purchasing our product, the better. So if your company's in a position to offer that, I think it's fantastic. Just make sure that your merchant gateway is set up for that. A lot of merchants have different rules when it comes to putting subscription-based products online. So make sure that you have a brief conversation with whoever your merchant gateway provider is before you offer that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from anybody in the audience before we sign off? Here we go. Do you suggest linking the website through a CRM, or is the website a standalone application?
It's a little bit of both, but if you connect your CRM to it, depending on the CRM, you can bring back a lot of data to populate into your customer profile. So as an example, I think what they're referring to is, with the right hookup to your CRM, you will not only know that this person visited the website and filled out a form, but you'll also know that they visited page A, page B, and page C, which gives you a lot of ability to build a customer profile. And again, depending on the setup of the CRM, you can also maybe import the search query. So imagine that in just a few seconds, you've gone from, hey, this person that we know nothing about visited our website, to this person visited our website, filled out a form, and spent time on these pages and originated to our website by using these words. I mean, holy cow, think about how much differently you can market to that person with that level of information. So integrating your website with your CRM is an incredibly valuable opportunity to segment your marketing. And if we're looking downstream and saying, what's the Holy Grail? The Holy Grail is about segmentation, not treating everybody equally and marketing specific opportunities to specific people based on what we know about them. Personalization will become the key challenge for companies late in 2021 and in 2022.
And lastly, we do have somebody asking about a link to the slideshow. Matt, I think we'll get together after this and I'll be able to get a copy of your slides. And then for everybody who is on the recording today, it will be available to you. You'll be sent a copy of the recording. We'll also be putting a recording on our YouTube channel. MACF has a YouTube channel with all of our past webinars, so you can see this and other webinars that Matt has done for us, and some of our other experts that have come on throughout the past year. Doesn't look like there's anything else, so with that, we want to thank you so much, Matt, for your time today. Your many years of experience in the digital world and your knowledge of the manufacturing industry has really come through. We'd also like to thank Florida Makes once again for their continued support of Florida's manufacturers, and we thank all of you for your participation today. If you'd like more information about MACF, please check out our website. It's www.macf.biz. And for future events, please visit the website events page. We hope that you'll join us when Matt returns on February 25th for our next webinar, using data to drive business growth. And as you exit the webinar, we're seeking your feedback about how to improve these webinars and better meet your needs with topics of value to you. So please watch for upcoming webinars through MACF and Florida Makes. Have a great day, stay well, and keep manufacturing. Thank you so much, Matt, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.